One fog-laden morning, an ancient, weathered boat quietly departed the harbor, carrying a man whose eyes held a world of memories. Who is he? Why does he set sail alone, year after year, steering toward that one mysterious point in the vast ocean? No flags, no flowers, only a single black box, locked tight, resting on the deck. But that day, everything changed. Suddenly, a Coast Guard cutter rammed into his vessel. They branded him an intruder, bound his hands like a criminal. They didn't know who he was. They didn't ask. 30 minutes later, the horizon erupted with 8 Navy warships, emerging like ghosts from the past. What is happening? What secret compelled the Navy to intervene? This is the story of John Harper, a veteran who kept his oath of silence for 51 years, and the moment when the truth shattered the fog. Join us as we explore his journey, where loyalty, loss, and truth collide on the water. What would you say to this man if you could sit beside him for just 5 minutes? Please hit the subscribe button. Join us for more captivating and thrilling stories. John Harper has reached his 79th year, yet those slender soldier's legs of his still rise before dawn, following the worn path down to the harbor. The coastal California town he's called home for 40 years seems accustomed to his familiar silhouette each morning. A faded canvas jacket, a frayed wool cap, and always clutched in his hand, an old coffee thermos, its paint chipped away so far that the metal beneath gleams. With every twist of the lid, the steam of hot coffee escapes, reminding him and us that though age may wear down the body, his spirit still burns with a hidden flame. The Silent Oath, his boat, aptly named, rests haphazardly among crowded fishing vessels and tourist launches, its hull rusted, its wooden frame cracked, windshields crudely patched with clear plastic. Locals watch him with curious eyes. At times, a few old fishermen squat on a neighboring deck to ask about the catch or the price of fuel, yet none truly grasp the story behind that ancient craft. Few realize that not a single plank on the Silent Oath was bought at a market. John himself stripped away every rotten layer, carved, sanded, polished, and refitted each piece by hand. For over 20 years, he labored with the devotion of a manic carpenter. At first, townsfolk whispered that he was obsessed, but to John, the boat was his only remaining friend, a testament to decades buried deep within his heart. The vessel's history is more mysterious than his own life. As he once told his only daughter, Grace, the Silent Oath began as a Navy warship frame, officially vanished from records in 1972, when he unearthed its dilapidated hull on an abandoned military beach. Experts declared it nothing but scrap metal. Yet John saw its soul, the hidden life beneath layers of rust and shell-shattered wood. His wife, Elizabeth, passed away over a decade ago. She alone understood his fixation on restoring the boat. She would sit beside him, stroke the resin-wet wood, whisper encouragement. "You're doing the right thing, Johnny." From that moment on, John grew taciturn. Perhaps because her words touched the deepest wound, a scar from wartime, from the night of December 7th, 1941, when Pearl Harbor stole his dearest friend and a piece of his soul. The sea is the only place John finds peace. When his silver hair whips in the morning breeze and gentle waves caress the hull, he feels reunited with youth, with flags and trenches. No words cross his lips, only the sound of oars cutting the water and wind whistling through cracked planks. It seems every worldly clamor and fatigue is left behind. Only he and the vast ocean remain. Each year in winter, John observes a ritual on December 7th. At dawn, he forgoes his coffee thermos. Instead, he quietly steps outside, carrying a jet-black wooden box, its iron latch green with age. No one knows what it holds, not even Grace, now grown and married. When she asks, John only lowers his gaze, murmurs, "You'll understand when you have the courage to look." From that moment, a silent mystery drifted between father and daughter, unspoken and unresolved. Fishermen sometimes see him slip away from the pier, glide through the morning mist, vanish into the horizon's haze. They guess he's fishing, or simply seeking solitude. Few know his destination's exact coordinates, precise to the second, deep in the Pacific, where a long-ago naval battle played out, and where John's most painful memory remains anchored. This year's voyage is like any other, yet different. The Silent Oath now carries a brand new radio set, which John spent an entire night installing below deck. He inspects his antique compass, wipes linseed oil around its needle, then steps onto the deck to place the black box on the waxed wood. The sea laps against the hull in steady rhythm, as if whispering, "Go now, John. The time has come." The pier dims beyond Windward Point. Fading lanterns and the red-roofed house hidden in mist recede. The air carries the scent of engine oil and fresh fish from the morning market. Before the sail unfurls in silence, John snaps shut the box, fastens its latch, and draws in a deep breath. He closes his eyes, recalls Elizabeth's golden hair cascading over her shoulders, her gentle smile, the warmth of her hand in his. Then, the flash of ordnance on USS Arizona, the cries of his comrades, and shards of glass raining into the sea. A soft whistle from the dock signals departure, but the Silent Oath has already slipped beyond hearing. No one sees John glance back. Only the waves bear his story, each gleaming trail etched by his oar. As the fog lifts and morning sun pierces the cloud layer, it illuminates the black box, reminding us inside lies a fragment of memory, an unfulfilled oath, and perhaps the beginning of John Harper's final chapter. He knows this voyage will change everything, not because he'll reunite with his departed wife, nor because his daughter will finally learn his secret, but because with each journey, he immerses himself in the past and vows anew to live on, even if alone upon the boundless sea, with a heart still ablaze as when he first gripped a Navy rifle. And when he returns, the Silent Oath will tie up once more, carrying the story of a veteran who never yielded to time. The bay lay so still at dawn that each dewdrop hovered above the water. It mirrored the hazy glow of a sun barely peeking over the clouds. John Harper sat firmly behind the Silent Oath's wheel. His eyes still gleamed behind the patched-up glass. His hand rested lightly on the helm. Each sinewy finger moved with the precision of a seasoned naval pilot who's weathered countless stormy seas. When the vessel reached that secret coordinate, marked in his heart and etched with pain, he quietly shut off the engine, letting the boat drift upon the gentle currents. The air itself seemed to freeze. John drew in a long breath. He scanned the placid sea as if the faint ripple might finally unveil its deepest secrets. He released the wheel, allowing the Silent Oath to drift free. Its hull rocked softly. This private ritual had endured for years. Kill the engine. Listen to the waves whisper alongside the hull. Let the mist embrace him like the tender arms of his departed wife. It was more than communion with the ocean. It was a vow from a veteran to his own soul, the Silent Oath. But today, That silence shattered with an odd, whirring hum, metal scraping against fiberglass. John frowned. He leaned over the aft deck, seeking the source of that strange noise. Moments later, the clear sky revealed a sudden shape, a Coast Guard cutter hurtling toward him like an arrow. No warning lights, no siren's blast. In an instant, the silent oath lurched. Metal clanged against the hull with a thunderous crack. The boat heeled sharply. Groans of twisted iron and splintered planks filled the air. John gripped the rail. His eyes darted to the unfamiliar sailors on deck. They wore dark uniforms, carried rifles at the ready, their faces lined with urgency. Before he could react, one of them thrust hard into his back. He went sprawling upon the wet deck. "You're trespassing in a restricted zone," barked a harsh voice. No chance for explanation. Thick ropes bound John's wrists, waterlogged jacket dragging seawater across the deck. They hauled him like worthless cargo to a corner of the boat. Sunlight struggled through the dense mist to illuminate their captive. In that moment, John showed no panic. His eyes flashed equal parts fury and resolve. They could not read the tiny inscription on the helm's rail. They hadn't seen the faded letters beneath the wheel. USS Meridian, U.S. Navy, 1940. They did not know this decrepit vessel held decades of history, treasured memories of a veteran who once fought for his comrades' lives. To them, John was merely a misguided old man, intruding where the government forbade. But they were gravely mistaken. John tightened his jaw. He coaxed his bound arms to his feet. The sea breeze carried the tang of salt and diesel. He tilted his head, listening intently to the small radio he'd installed below deck. Though the waves hadn't yet carried a signal, he knew his distress call had already been sent the moment he killed the engine. 2 haunting syllables over the airwaves. Mayday. Followed by his exact location. The Coast Guard men snarled. They yanked the ropes tighter, pressing John against the rail. One of their shoulders brushed the black wooden box on deck. The box Grace, his daughter, had never dared to open. It trembled. Rust flaked from its iron clasp, revealing a faint crack. In that instant, hope flickered in John's eyes. He bent down, maneuvering his bound hand toward the lock. This was the deciding moment. Open the box, or keep his oath of silence. He closed his eyes. He remembered Elizabeth's gentle gaze by candlelight, her whispered words, "When the time comes, don't hesitate." His trembling but determined hand slipped beneath the box, found the tiny wooden key he had hidden along the hull. No one knew it was there. An alarm's shrill blast cut through the tense air. The radio crackled to life with a raspy voice from the rescue center. "Silent oath, we've received your signal. Hang on, help is on the way." The intruders turned, eyes wide with shock and anger. In that heartbeat, John seized the key, twisted it, opened the wooden lid. Inside lay not weapons nor secret documents, but an old pocket watch, its silver plating yellowed with age, its band missing a single link. The second hand ticked steadily, alive since the day Commander Riggs, his closest friend, fell at Pearl Harbor. Beneath the watch rested a small photograph, sealed between plastic. John and Elizabeth aboard a post-war cruise, smiling beneath a clear sky. John spoke no word. He lifted the watch before his chest. His gaze bore into the onlookers. Time seemed to pause. Waves, alarms, and wind receded into silence. Only he remained, the keepsake watch, the indelible memory. Then the distant roar of rescue engines echoed across the waves. A large ship cleaved the mist like a blade. Blue lights flickered on its deck. Sirens drowned the hush. Rescue crews leapt aboard, untied John's bonds, led him to their warm cabin, beside an empty coffee thermos, and faced him with the open box. John exhaled slowly. His eyes absorbed the watch. He offered a faint smile, one that held a lifetime of pain and unspoken memories. For him, this was more than an extraordinary voyage. It was the final affirmation. Though time marches on, though life brings endless trials, memory and the silent oath possess the power to transcend every boundary. The silent oath drifted quietly on the open sea. Its helmsman, 79-year-old John Harper, stood in silent reflection, a shining testament to a past that would never yield amid the vastness of the ocean. 30 minutes passed in what felt like endless slowness. The fog at last began to lift, revealing a horizon ablaze in the pink-orange glow of dawn. The sea suddenly brightened. Each wave glittered, reflecting the first rays of morning light. And in that very moment, 8 naval warships appeared on the distant horizon, immense and majestic, towering like mobile fortresses upon the vast ocean. They formed a tight formation, layer upon layer, a steel wall impervious to intrusion. Destroyers thrust their masts skyward, their bows aimed unwaveringly at the tiny vessel named the Silent Oath, while cruisers, bristling with heavy guns, could silence any foe with a single, overwhelming presence. Confronted with such grandeur, the Coast Guard crew on the smaller ship recoiled in panic. These same men, confident only hours before that they'd subdued John Harper, now grasped the grave seriousness of the situation. The commanding officer, his face ashen after a tense night, hurriedly ordered John's hands bound with thick rope. The rasp of fibers against the rail sounded harsh, stoking their rising alarm. He commanded the radio to be activated and received a terse 5-digit code. No explanation, no context. His hands trembled. His eyes widened at the blinking display. He replayed the sequence once more, then froze, realizing he had just triggered something extraordinary, beyond his authority or understanding. On the corner of the deck, John Harper remained eerily calm. His gaze swept across the 8 warships, then fixed upon the Coast Guard officer, not with rage, but with a blend of curiosity and resolve. They had tied him as if he were a dangerous criminal. Yet in truth, John was only a 79-year-old veteran who'd served in the Navy over half a century ago, now performing a personal ritual to revisit his past. They could not see the war scars etched into his hands. They did not know the decaying wooden hull concealed decades of heroic and agonizing memory. Before they could comprehend what was unfolding, a smaller naval vessel, nearly invisible in the mist, cut through the waves with a roaring approach toward the Silent Oath. Its deck officers moved with swift professionalism. They boarded without request, without the usual negotiation protocols. Ignoring the Coast Guard's objections, they came straight to John. In an instant, ropes were cut free. John felt the rigid bindings fall away as each line was sliced through with a precise knife. The naval commander, clad in pristine uniform, stepped lightly toward the black wooden box lying nearby. He knelt. His finger brushed the flaking paint and corroded latch. This was no container of weapons or classified files, but the keepsake that held John's very soul, a secret not meant for anyone else. The commander offered a single, weighty nod to John as if to say, "We know who you are, and we've come for you." That brief gesture carried such authority that even the Coast Guard fell silent, frozen in fear and confusion. John rose. He rubbed the spot on his wrist where the ropes had constricted, then strode past the stunned Coast Guard officers with a cold silence. He reached the helm, placed his hand upon the pallid wheel, and turned it slowly, a simple act that asserted absolute control. No words were spoken, for none were needed. The naval presence was unmistakable. 8 colossal ships encircling the silent oath like sentinels from his past, ready to defend him against any threat. In that hushed moment, the ocean seemed to inhale deeply, exhaling a moist breath. Waves lapped the hull in steady rhythm, as though recounting the veteran's half-century saga. John turned his head toward the sunrise, where the warships stood solemn beneath the new sun. They needed no cannon blast, no shouted command, yet their mere presence transformed these waters into John Harper's domain, a man who once faced life and death at sea, now a living legend. The Coast Guard, left to watch uneasily, began to realize they had inadvertently interfered with a high-level operation, and with a man who could not be dismissed as a simple trespasser. Their eyes widened in panic as they noticed the naval flag fluttering on the small ship that had just approached. They remembered that 5-digit code on the radio, a concise but potent signal, now irreversibly beyond recall with a few internal reports. John never looked back. He maintained his grip on the wheel, angling the bow toward the warships. Why did they not move? Why did no one utter a single order? Because they were waiting for John to lift his head, wave, or give some silent signal. At sea, honor and authority are upheld through unspoken gestures rather than boisterous commands. When the larger ships remained still, John gently pushed on the wheel. The silent oath tilted slightly. That was the gesture of peace. He accepted their escort. He trusted the protection of his old comrades. At that moment, one naval officer returned John's subtle signal with a crisp salute, solemn yet deeply respectful. John nodded in reply. His distant gaze turned to the path ahead, where the mist had just cleared, where dawn had just broken, and where he, after so many solitary days, had finally reclaimed his rightful place. The silent oath cut through the waves toward the 8 mobile fortresses, embraced by the steadfast arms of the Navy. The California harbor shrank to a speck behind him. Ahead lay the long journey with his former comrades, soldiers who once fought beside him and now stood ready to sail with him to any shore. In the quiet space filled only by waves and the gentle hum of the engine, John Harper, a 79-year-old veteran, smiled, silent yet complete, a final affirmation that his silent oath had never grown cold. The black wooden box sat on the deck like a foreign object. It drew every gaze and thought. For 51 years, no one had opened it, not for lack of a key, but because the silent oath bound John Harper for more than half a century. Beneath layers of paint darkened by time, scratches and cracks told of long journeys gone by, of sweat and tears soaked into every grain of wood. Above, the open sky welcomed the sea breeze through its seams, carrying salt and the murmur of waves, as if to remind us that every secret eventually finds its moment to emerge. John knelt before the box, his head bowed in quiet reverence. In his coat pocket, he felt the oilcloth-wrapped key, small and light, hidden against the hull in the darkness of 1972. His fingers trembled as they peeled back the fabric, revealing metal dulled by salt spray. He raised the key, pressed it into the lock that had never once turned. The first click sounded like an engine firing, followed by a second and third click, decisive, until the final seal crumbled. The mist seemed to swirl around his hands, as though the ocean itself exhaled after 51 years of waiting. When the lid creaked open, there was no golden glitter, no classified documents shimmering to light. Instead, John slowly withdrew a thick, leather-bound journal, so old its spine was cracked. The cover warped, rain stains dulled its leather, yet the inside pages remained crisp, as if penned just yesterday. He set the journal down on the deck, then extracted a small signal transmitter, its metal corroded, antenna bent by years, buttons bearing the last user's fingerprints. Next came a warped identification card, its edge stamped with the initials GHT, for Ghost Tide, and finally a small swatch of fabric embroidered with swirling black waves, its silver stitching worn thin. Each item in the box was a fragment of an untold story. The journal contained John's entries since 1972, regular purple ink notations, exact coordinates at sea, radio frequencies sent, and the names of 8 soldiers from Operation Ghost Tide, a mission so secret it left no official record. Every page bore fingerprints, salt sprays, and water stains from the briny deep. On the final page, the entry for December 7th, 1972, stood clear. Still here, no reply. The last drop of ink remained cold, reminding us of a voyage that ended in silence. John gently handed the journal to the naval officer standing beside him. The man's eyes were red with emotion. He took it, leafed through the pages with the solemnity of one holding a sacred text. The air fell still. Only the sound of waves lapping the hull remained. The journal had become irrefutable proof of a campaign erased from all records. The 8 names, once classified as non-existent, now lived on each handwritten line. Next, John presented the signal transmitter to another officer, his own eyes shining with pride and sorrow. This small device had captured the moment the silent oath vanished from official radar, preserved the final Mayday plea and mission code, then fallen silent upon the open sea. A device once deemed useless was now a crucial piece, evoking the image of a ship hidden from the world. The black wave fabric was the Ghost Tide unit's insignia, emblem of those who raced death itself. Dark threads intertwined with silver stitches suggested waves crashing against a ship in the night. Frayed edges and pinpoint holes on the black cloth added a mournful weight. John traced a finger across the fabric, as if touching the souls of friends laid to rest. In the distance, the 8 warships remained still, forming a protective ring around the silent oath. One by one, their naval flags were lowered, without ceremony, as though a belated funeral for the 8 Ghost Tide soldiers, John's comrades. A mournful horn sounded, joined by a small bell ringing across the silent oath's deck. John felt his heart tighten as the flags touched the water, a reminder that Ghost Tide's honor and fighting spirit would never fade into oblivion. Amid that solemn moment, John whispered each name: Martos, Carlos, Jenkins, Lee. His voice was as soft as the sea breeze, each name a tribute to unacknowledged sacrifice. The waters of the North Pacific lay unusually silent, as if listening. It was no longer John's private ritual, but a collective remembrance, witnessed by ocean and man alike. The silent oath leaned gently between the arms of its 8 guardians, like a traveler returned from a long, mysterious journey. The now empty black box rested again on the deck, marking a historic milestone. 51 years of silence, 51 years of waiting, 51 years of an unbroken vow. John stood on deck, gazing silently at the endless sea, the battlefield of old, and the grave of many a comrade. Now, the ocean did more than hear waves. It heard the oath and the whispered names of those long gone. In the final piece, sunlight pierced the mist, casting a warm golden glow on John's face. He smiled, gently brushed away a tear unshed, reminding himself that though time passes and secrets may remain hidden for decades, loyalty and courage endure as the greatest legacy. And now, with the journal, the transmitter, the ID card, and the fabric, undeniable proof, the story of Ghost Tide would enter history, not only in the deep, but in the hearts of every American who witnessed this final chapter. The truth rippled along the California coast like relentless breakers. In San Diego, a radar technician working under the dim glow of monitors suddenly detected an unusual naval formation traversing the Pacific. On his screen, satellite imagery flashed clearly. 8 colossal warships surrounding a single, diminutive wooden vessel. Within hours, the image leaked across the internet, shared from naval forums to social media, sparking a viral frenzy known as Ghost Tide. Defense news outlets scrambled for clues. A retired naval analyst who once served under Rear Admiral Riggs quickly published a detailed expose on Ghost Tide, a covert operation believed active near the Marshall Islands in late 1972. In his report, he disclosed the strange radio frequency logged at those coordinates. He evoked memories of midnight watches and the mournful May Day calls that echoed before silence descended forever. Whispers grew so loud that veterans who'd served in Ghost Tide could no longer stay silent. One by one, they came forward with stories of freezing nights at sea, of missions erased from every official record, and of why they'd kept silent for nearly half a century. Old black and white photos, young sailors in ink-stained uniforms, were reposted alongside heartfelt commentary. The past exhaled its sigh, demanding justice and recognition. Amid this media storm, reporters flocked to John Harper's seaside home. They set up recorders on his porch, pounded on his door, hailed him as the silent hero, or the great whistleblower. They sought every detail, the black box, the 8 names that never existed, the warped ID card stamped GHT. But John Harper was not there. He had quietly returned to the only vessel bound to his life, the Silent Oath. At sunset, the Silent Oath lay anchored near the pier, veiled in a thin mist. John sat resolutely at the helm, hands on the paint-chipped wheel. His gaze fixed upon the horizon, where the 8 warships still stood sentinel. He paid no heed to the lenses and microphones trained on him. In that moment, there was only him and the ocean, a bond unbroken for 7 decades. Soon after, the regular Navy dispatched a senior officer to meet John. Dropping his usual stern demeanor, he brought an astonishing offer: an honor medal for John, a public apology for the years of enforced silence, and formal recognition of Operation Ghost Tide as part of naval history. They presented a sealed letter, pledging to archive the journal, transmitter, and unit insignia at Norfolk. Yet John refused one thing. "I don't need a medal. I am not the story," he replied, his voice soft but firm. "The real story is them, the ones who fell without ever having their names spoken." At last, John agreed to send 3 precious artifacts, the cracked leather journal, the rusted transmitter, and the black wave insignia, to Norfolk, not to be displayed under glass, but to be touched, to carry the scent of sweat and salt on paper and metal. "So they understand," John resolved. That history isn't just printed words or technical data. It is what people lived and sacrificed. When the exhibit opened, there were no fireworks, no fanfare, just a simple wooden sign at the gallery entrance. Ghost Tide, 1972. 8 forgotten names. One survivor who kept silent. He remained silent until silence became a crime. Inside, footsteps echoed across the hushed space. All eyes turned to the weathered wooden table where the 3 time-worn relics were solemnly displayed. The handwritten journal still bore smudged ink, where John's trembling fingers recorded each day's coordinates. The transmitter seemed poised to faintly replay its final, wind-torn messages. The black wave fabric evoked storms that once swallowed so many lives. Beneath warm lights, a group of veterans quietly whispered the names of the fallen. Miller, Alvarez, Chang, Johnson, Peterson, O'Leary, Nakamura, Thompson. They bowed their heads before the journal's final line. Still here, no reply. The air thickened. Silent tears traced the cheeks of those now silver-haired warriors. They had come home to tell their story, to honor the painful oath they once took. The small gallery filled as murmurs passed from lip to ear. That old man endured so long. They must be remembered. History is finally set right. Each comment a tribute, like waves lapping the shore, reminding us that memory must never fade. In one corner, a small screen replayed the satellite image the San Diego technician discovered. The white silhouettes on deep blue reappeared in high resolution, capturing the steel armada's bold stance and the lone, fragile wooden ship. John Harper did not attend the opening. He remained aboard the Silent Oath, at the wheel, staring through the mist toward the horizon. The sea welcomed him back in silence as a faithful friend, still cradling his worn memories and unbroken vow. He knew. His story had become living history, not lying at the ocean's floor, but preserved in the hearts of every visitor to Norfolk. The truth, like relentless waves, will never cease to spread, and the story of Ghost Tide, the 51-year silent oath, has touched a nation's heart, proving the enduring power of memory, honor, and loyalty beyond time. The silent oath lay motionless at the pier, its wooden hull bleached by a century of sun and salt. Now recognized as a naval relic of historic value, it stood sacred, untouchable. The townspeople, once seeing only rotting planks, now bowed before a living witness to heroic and mysterious ocean tales. They placed handwritten notes of gratitude, folded flags, and delicate paper boats at its prow, silent gestures, yet full of meaning. We understand, and we honor you. Each morning, groups of local students were led to the pier, not for selfies or leisure, but to feel the solemn air, to hear waves lap the hull as if reciting history's deep notes. They learned of John Harper, the veteran who kept silence for over half a century, of Operation Ghost Tide, buried in 1972's fog, and of the black box holding his journal and unit insignia. Wide-eyed, they listened in wonder, as though they'd discovered the courageous heart of a predecessor. Along the quay, Ellie, a young naval archivist, regularly polished the compass displayed beneath the wheelhouse. She wiped away every salt grain until its face shone as brightly and accurately as on day one. It was more than a chore. Each cleaning was a quiet conversation with John, with the past, with the unbroken silent oath. One golden noon, as Ellie laid a soft cloth on the compass case, a scruffy 10-year-old boy wandered up. His eyes widened at the rusted wheel and faded hull stripes. "Miss," he asked, wonder in his voice. Is this his warship? Ellie smiled gently, crouched to meet his gaze. No, she replied softly. It's his voice. The boy frowned in concentration, then smiled, as if unlocking the ocean's greatest secret. Passed down from one generation to the next, Ellie's words became the silent oath's creed. Listen to the past, for it still whispers amid the waves. The story spread not with scandal's clamor, but like a candle's glow in the dark, warm, enduring, and illuminating. Every December 7th, the town fell into reverent silence. A naval vessel anchored offshore. It broke formation and flew its flag at half-mast. One lone horn sounded, not an alarm, but a farewell. The pier quivered beneath ocean breaths. Mist wove a mysterious shroud. Townspeople stood with bowed heads, eyes upon the silent oath, where John knelt to open the black box, where he handed over his journal, where the silent oath was finally laid bare. Even civilians felt the ceremony's gravity. They donned dark clothing. They remained silent throughout. No big screens, no red carpet, only a gray sky, the humble wooden vessel, and a trembling naval ensign on the mast. When the flag lowering ended, the waves resumed their normal rhythm, as if no ritual had occurred, yet history had been duly honored. In that hushed space, one could glimpse John Harper, the legendary elder, seated on the silent oath's deck, eyes closed, arms wrapped around his worn journal, leaning gently against the rail. He spoke no words. He remained silent as always. For him, the waves were the final dialogue, a symphony for departed souls, and for those who truly listened. The harbor master came upon the scene one dawn, sunrise light filtering through the window, illuminating the torn journal pages. Warm rays brushed John's shoulder, as if to comfort decades of enduring cold. The master dared not disturb him. He simply recorded the moment, painting a living canvas set against the open sea. Soon after, on the distant horizon, the 8 warships reassembled in perfect formation, steadfast sentinels. They lowered flags, blew one final horn, then cut through the mist toward the pier. For them, no cameras or broadcasts were needed. The true witnesses were already present: John Harper, Ellie, the curious boy, the harbor master, and hundreds of silent hearts watching. That day's farewell held no tearful fanfare, only solemn eyes and hands clasped in blessing. The naval ensign ran the length of the laboring wooden vessel, and the silent oath wore its ceremonial cloak. The sea's gentle lap continued, echoing history's honored refrain. John Harper was no longer the forgotten hero. He became the keeper of his own tale, etched in every stone of the quay, in every tear quietly shed, and in each pebble that whispered of the waves. He personified the power of loyalty, of a silent oath, and of the desire to bring memory into the light. The boat still rocked in steady rhythm. The townspeople saw it as a heartbeat upon the sea, a heartbeat that still carried John's voice. With every wave, the silent oath reminded all, the past has never left us, and the silent oath will forever echo with the boundless ocean. Perhaps that is the living proof America must remember. Please leave your thoughts and share these stories with your family and friends in the United States.